between Tibet and India, Nepal, and Bhutan. Our goal was to hike from Darjeeling into Sikkim, then to Nepal, and finally into Bhutan. Little did I know at this time what was going on in Darjeeling. Actually, what was really going on was that there was a revolution going on. The Gurkha National Liberation Front was rebelling against the Indian government because they wanted autonomy. So we arrived in Darjeeling at night. The next day I walked around the city and I saw a bunch of burned out buildings, burned out in different places. The year before there had been 108 hotels operating in Darjeeling. The year that we were there were 7. As I was walking through town, I stopped in one of the hotels and I was just walking through the ruins of the hotel. And I saw a Tibetan woman there, and she was picking up scraps of wood. And I just greeted her, Tessie Delay, because I've traveled in the Himalayas before and I knew what the greeting was. She was so excited that somebody knew her language and was friendly that she invited me back to her house. I met her children. I visited with her and she fixed a meal for me. And I promised her when we returned, that I would come back. We started our trek the next day, and we ended up hiking through Sikkim to the border between Sikkim and Nepal to a mountain called Sandakpo. Sandakpo is located at about 4,000 meters. We hiked for several days to get there. On the evening when we arrived, it was sunset and the full moon. So the full moon rose up out of the clouds. The sun was setting in the west, and the mountains were pink like fire. It was amazing. Here, you could see Kanchenjunga, the 3rd highest mountain in the world. Here, Everest. There, Lhotse and Makalu, 4 of the 5 highest mountains in the world in the same place. Really remarkable place. Wonderful, spectacular place. So, as we continued our hike, we ended up on the last day in a small village. And we were going to stay the night in the village. I had brought a number of ballpoint pens to give to children because, having traveled in this area and other places, I know that they don't even have paper. They don't have pens. They don't have anything. So I got out my ballpoint pens and I started giving them to kids. And they were running from all over the place, running to get pens from me. And when all the kids had gotten their pens, I put the few back in my backpack, and I thought, I felt really good about myself. What have I done? I did something really wonderful. I helped these children. A little bit later in the evening, over tea, a woman walked into the tea room where we were drinking tea, and she said, "Who was it that gave the pens to the children?" And I said, "Oh, it was me." And she said, "Do you know how much trouble you've caused? Do you have any idea what's going on in the village now?" And I said, "No." And she said, "All the children are crying because they didn't get pens." She said, "How many pens do you have left? Give them to me." So I took them out of my backpack and I gave her all that I had. She said, "It's not enough." I gave her everything. This is the law of unintended consequences. You do something because you think you're helping. But in the end, maybe you don't help at all. Maybe you just cause more problems. And that night, I got a lesson that I will never forget. We went to bed, and at 4 o'clock in the morning, somebody woke me up with a flashlight in my face and a gun. And he said, "Get up. Get out of bed." And I thought, is he going to shoot me for giving pens to children? It was a young guy dressed in black. They forced us out of the hotel, and when we came out into the village, it was snowing, and the whole scene was white. These guys were herding everybody from the village out. They marched us through the streets and to the edge of town. And they put us in a big group of people. There were 20, 25 of these guys, Gurkhas, with AK-47s. And I thought, what's going on? You know, we didn't dare talk. We didn't dare say anything. And I was thinking, what is going on? I had no idea. And I was, you know, are they going to shoot us? This was the big thing. I looked back at the village and I saw the beginning of a fire. You could see some small flames here and there. And while I was standing there, this little girl came up to me with her hands up like this. And she was crying, and I picked her up, and I held her. And she was saying something to me in Tibetan, although I didn't know what it was at the time. She wanted to find her mom. She'd been separated from her mother. So I was holding her, and I saw the fire getting bigger and bigger. The village was completely on fire at this point. People were crying. Old women, grandmothers who could barely walk, were forced into this group. And these guys were standing there with their AK-47s guarding us. The fire got so intense that it started to melt the snow closer and closer to us, and it got so hot that I had to turn my back because it was burning my face. The flames got bigger and bigger, and the buildings started to collapse. They started falling down. And at some point, I remember that the clouds parted for a minute, and it stopped snowing, and there was the full moon above us. And you could see this white landscape all around, and the buildings burning. Then, to the east, you could see the lightening of the sky, the first signs of daylight. We looked and we saw that it was the sun was going to come up soon. And I looked around at the fire. You could smell the smoke. It was almost burning your eyes. It was so bad. And the Gurkhas just vanished. They just left us there. We all stood there for a minute. Everybody was looking at everybody. And finally somebody said, okay, let's go. The village was not going to survive. Nothing was going to remain from the village. And so we started walking to the next village. I put the little girl up on my shoulders, and we started walking together. All of us. I don't know how many people, 200, 250 people marching to this next village. So the law of unintended consequences is this. The village was burned because we were there, because they were taking care of and admitting tourists. Because we had been there, because somebody had found out, they decided to burn the village and burn the village to the ground. That's the law of unintended consequences. The punishment for helping us, for hospitality, for inviting us into their homes, was that they lost everything. Mr. Toastmaster.